I find these things that I hadn't looked at since I wrote them. And I'm noticing, like, wow, I was really in a messed up kind of place. Like things that were very dark, suicidal, almost as if I was like writing down prayers.
For a long time, Joseph Caramanno kept this box closed, shoved into a dresser drawer. This year, he returned to these journal entries from high school, finding traces of his encounters with a Catholic priest.
Psychological killer, sexual predator who imposes ashes on the forehead of his helpless victim. Ashes contain fingerprints. Ashes are a fetish symbol. Turn him on.
Joseph remembers the smell of this priest's cologne and what kind of candies he kept on his desk.
This was a junior year yearbook.
He also remembers something more painful, which for a long time he tried to forget.
There he is.
And what was his name?
Father Paddock. I do remember there's something with a belt buckle. Something with a belt buckle. Just the action of the belt opening and the sound of the clanking of it, him touching my leg, rubbing up and down my leg. And that was the thing that I was like, well, that's not supposed to be happening.
Joseph is not alone. Several other men have come forward in a series of exclusive interviews with Fault Lines.
Just kind of lost.
They allege years of abuse at the hands of Father John Paddack in Catholic schools across New York City.
He just took advantage.
A blessed Sunday, everybody. Cardinal Dolan here.
Sparking the latest revelations in a decades-old scandal that's shaken the Catholic Church to its foundation.
Boy, these past few months have been tough on our Catholic family, right?
Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, told the 2.5 million Catholics under his watch to rest assured.
I heard that what you want is accountability, transparency, and action to combat this evil.
He claimed that there were no active priests facing credible abuse allegations in his archdiocese. Clergy abuse, he said, was largely a problem of the past. Our investigation into Father Paddock revealed a different story.
Well, they were allowing these predator priests to frolic around aimlessly on the streets of New York with open access, under the shield of a collar.
It's a story that raises questions about New York's Catholic hierarchy and whether its leader has put the prestige of the church above the survival of its victims.
I wonder if there was someone that went right up to knock on the door of St. Patrick's Cathedral and said, Father so-and-so did this to me, blah, blah, blah. How long would it take for Father so-and-so be removed or suspended from that ministry? How long would it take for the investigation to begin? I think it should not take more than, an hour instead of a week, a month, a year.
But there have been multiple allegations. Are you willing to
hang a priest because of a press conference, or do you want it to be investigated?
There have been multiple allegations.
Are you investigated? Drop it.
Are you willing to put children in harm's way? At what cost?
I'm telling you no. Okay, stop.
What do you think the church should do?
Stop hiding.
This man, who we'll call Gabriel, never forgot the abuse he faced as a 12-year-old Catholic school student.
So that's the church, and you see where the black roof is?
Uh-huh.
That's the rectory.
Today, this view from his home serves as a constant reminder.
So when you look out the window now and you can see the church, what do you think about?
Just how that destroyed my youth, man. That could have killed me, honestly.
Here in the center of Manhattan's Washington Heights neighborhood sits Incarnation Parish and School. It was supposed to be a refuge for Gabriel, who grew up without his parents.
Paint a picture for me about what your life looked like at that time.
Wow. Pretty lost. Just kind of lost.
It makes you emotional to think about it.
Yeah. Everything was school. school and my grandma. Grandma was very sick at the time. And it was just me and her.
It was 1984, and Father John Paddack had just been ordained. His first post would be Gabriel's church.
There is a photo here where a little altar boy is jumping into Father Paddock's arms. And then Father Paddock says, "These are my children," pressing the boy's head closer. "Now I look at all children that I deal with as my children."
Gabriel was one of those altar boys. He told us that Father Paddack molested him during confession for 2 years.
How do you get along with someone? Confession, you don't have a crowd, do you? It's a one-on-one thing. Confession was, I'm sitting on a chair, okay? He's sitting directly in front of me. His knees are, one knee is here, the other one's here, okay? He's got his left hand behind your head, and his right hand is here. And his right hand would be from your knee and sometimes end up over here, most of the time. And then he would, you know, and actually point and touch and say, hey, do you use that? Do you masturbate? Say the truth. Go do 10 Hail Marys.
Do you think you were mentioning before that you felt like he would prey on certain people?
I think the more vulnerable people, yeah. You know, quiet kids.
What makes you think that he was going after vulnerable kids?
Because I was definitely one of them. Think about it. What parent is going to complain to you that his son is being touched inappropriately? I didn't have one.
Gabriel almost canceled our interview. He said it made him sick to think about these memories. But the father of two knew that Father Paddack was still out there.
Does he face any consequences for his actions?
No. How? He's still working, right? With kids. Ouch.
For this investigation, we spoke to 5 men who say that Father Paddack abused them. Their attorneys told us the allegations form a pattern of abuse in Catholic schools from the early 1980s until the early 2000s.
These are not people that know one another. And then in the aggregate, as they're coming forward telling same and similar stories of pattern behavior, you're saying, we got a serial offender here.
Survivors have come forward from 3 different boroughs. Survivors of different ages, from different boroughs, at different facilities, and told the same story. Monsignor Paddock, using his position of authority, isolates those boys, either at the school or, in some cases, in his bedroom, in some cases at the church, wherever the opportunity may present itself.
By 2001, Paddock was an academic dean in Staten Island, where Joseph Caramanno was a student. High school was difficult for Joseph.
For WSJS-TV, I'm Joey Caramanno. Here's what's happening.
He'd been suicidal and was hospitalized, missing weeks of class.
Has been making children of all ages.
When Joseph returned to school, Father Paddack told his parents that he'd keep their son's medication in his office.
I think of my students today who are 16, 17 years old, and they have their issues, they have their troubles, and they go to people for help. And imagine taking advantage of that person in that unique situation. That's the worst of the worst, to take advantage of someone in their time of most need. They're most vulnerable.
In March 2019, Joseph reported Father Paddack to the Archdiocese. But months later, Paddack remained an active priest here at Notre Dame Parish in Upper Manhattan. We went there on a Sunday in June, just as he'd finished saying Mass.
I have a question for you. Do you know Joseph Caramanno?
Joseph?
Joseph Caramanno. He says that you sexually abused him as a teenage boy in Staten Island.
Don't know.
You don't know him? He's not the only one. We know of several other men who say that you abused them
as boys during confession
That
and
is wrong,
counseling.
absolutely wrong. They're lying. They're
So
looking
you
for
think
money.
they're lying?
They're looking for money.
We've actually spoken to many of them, and they say the reason that they're doing this is because they don't want children to be unsafe and to go through what they went
actually
through.
agree with them.
Father Paddock's denial echoed what he told the media in March.
It's really hard to speak up about this.
That's when a man named Rafael Mendoza stood in front of the church and told his story.
The coldness of the knob of the stethoscope while he's checking my heartbeat and all around my chest and slowly going down to my genitals.
But Paddock said he still had the support of the Archdiocese.
Direct quote was, "Right now, I know I do," he said. "I even spoke to the Cardinal." That was Cardinal Dolan. How long do you think that Cardinal Dolan will continue to protect you as more men come out with their stories?
I don't know.
Father Paddock said he didn't remember Joseph, but Joseph told us he can't forget Father Paddock.
Now, those people who have not yet confessed, you still have one more day to confess if there are any serious sins on your soul.
I got this stupid DVD of like these clips. So maybe I interviewed him or something for the TV news. I don't know.
With each discovery from his archive, Joseph's encounters with the priest came into sharper focus.
And there it is, the junior ring ceremony mass. I had forgotten that I was the lector at the mass, that he was the celebrant of the mass.
Now let's be seated and listen to the word of God. Our first reading will be Joseph Caramanno.
It's called you by name.
A reading from the
There in the church, Joseph read from the Bible, and Father Paddock sat right behind him.
There's no possible way that he could forget who I was based on the number of interactions I had with him. The only thing that would make sense to me is if, if I was just another kid that he touched and it was like, one and the same, faceless, nameless. That was his way of justifying it, blocking it out. That's the only thing I can think of.
You're just another kid that he touched.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be quite a number of us,
Paddock's accusers had reported their abuse to family, friends, and therapists years ago. But for a long time, these men didn't file lawsuits or seek prosecutions against the priest. That's because New York's restrictive statute of limitations law made it nearly impossible for them to do so.
The legal system should be geared to the needs of the victim, not the needs of the perpetrator or the institutions that caused it. And essentially, we're opening the door of the courthouse so that when the victim's ready, they come forward. Very attractive.
For 17 years, legal scholar Marcy Hamilton has fought for laws that give victims of child sex abuse more time to file claims. And in state capitals across the country, the Catholic Church has been her adversary.
There's a sense of entitlement that they deserve respect and they deserve deference. But nobody is going to get respect or deference so long as they endanger children. And that's what they're doing. So long as they lobby against the victims in the state legislatures, they're on the side of the pedophiles.
This year, 19 states and the District of Columbia broadened the statute of limitations for child sex crimes. When New York's law went into effect in August, Joseph and hundreds of survivors filed lawsuits against the Archdiocese of New York.
I didn't think I would be able to do this. I didn't think I would be able to tell anyone. But when I found out that after now 8 of us have come forward, and he's still in ministry in Manhattan, that something further had to be done.
Joseph became the second man this year to go public against Father Paddock. But his attorneys pointed to an even earlier claim.
Back in 2012, another survivor, just like Mr. Caramanno, came forward. He came forward, he reported to the Archdiocese the actions of Monsignor Paddock. He reported to the district attorney the actions of Monsignor Paddock. I was with him during that report those years ago.
This is your proof of claim. What does this say here? 6/27/12.
Yeah, 2012.
2012.
This man, who we'll call Hector, filed that initial report.
Here we go. Who committed the acts of sexual abuse or other wrongful conduct? Father John Paddack.
Hector was a 17-year-old student at Cardinal Hayes High School in the Bronx. That's when he went to Father Paddock for help dealing with the sexual abuse he'd faced as a child.
Somebody that was close to the family tried to molest me. I was 5 years old, and it bothered me. So in school, I felt maybe I should talk about it and get it out and move on, but I said it to the wrong person, and he just took advantage. I felt his hands in between my thighs and just going towards my private parts. I felt uncomfortable. And when I tried to roll the chair back again, he grabbed both of the handles, like to stop.
When he was holding the handles on the chair, what do you think he was trying to say with that?
Like, stop moving, just stop moving. I grabbed my bag and I left out the room. I went to the bathroom, just put my head in my hand, and I was just crying because I just thought something was wrong with me.
The Archdiocese investigated Hector's claim and cleared Paddock of wrongdoing.
The Archdiocese has known about the allegations against Monsignor Paddock for years, more than 6 years. Those allegations have been kept quiet by the Archdiocese.
They chose to believe the offender who had been accused and who would no doubt deny it, and then silently and quietly continue that offender in ministry from that day to this. That's what they chose to do.
When we met Father Paddock at church, he'd agreed to an on-camera interview. The next day, he changed his mind, and we ended up on the phone with him.
They all have sort of strikingly similar stories, and that's where, you know, it starts to get a little hard to...
I'm telling you, it's lies. The only time that we get close to a student is when I saw that there was something wrong with him, and no matter what my role was. My role as a priest is always to consult.
Would you pull them close to you? Would that be sort of a traditional way that you would counsel them, is like pulling them close to you?
Only if they were already close to me, because they usually had a choice of where to sit.
Right.
So, no, I might go over to them if they were crying.
Okay. Would your knees ever be touching theirs?
Depends on if I was sitting and they were sitting, if possible.
Okay. Would you ever have your knee inside their leg or anything like that?
Certainly not consciously.
In your consolation process, would you ever see yourself like rubbing on their leg or on their thigh?
No, that's inappropriate.
Never. Okay. And did you ever remove any student or altar boy's clothing for any reason?
Absolutely not.
So did you ever examine them? Well, medically examine them? No. You never did. You never examined them.
Of course not. I'm not a doctor.
With a stethoscope.
No, oh my God, no.
Okay.
No, I never owned a stethoscope. Never had access to one.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's one of the claims that a few of them made, was that you took...
lies.
There's Paddock.
For years, it appeared that Paddock's parishioners were not aware of the claims against their priest.
And here's Paddock in 2015 presiding over a confirmation mass.
Through it all, it seemed that Father Paddock could rely on the support of the Archbishop.
And here is a picture of Cardinal Dolan raising a glass with his buddy, Father Paddock. Looks like they're pretty close friends.
As a cardinal, Dolan is among a select group of the Vatican's most powerful men. For a time, there was even talk of him becoming the next pope.
Do you promise respect and obedience to me and my successors? May God, who has begun this good work in you, now bring it to fulfillment.
We wanted to know how long Cardinal Dolan would take Father Paddock's word over that of his accusers. Once again, we found ourselves in church, looking for a chance to greet the man who Catholics refer to as His Eminence. As Dolan greeted parishioners, he appeared to be in good spirits. That began to change once we asked him about Father Paddock.
The Archdiocese has known about sex abuse claims against Father Paddock
for 7 years now, and I was wondering, why is he still in active ministry
Because that
working
was
with children?
investigated and he was found to be innocent.
But there have been multiple allegations. Are you willing to...
Are you willing to hang a priest because of the press conference, or do you want it to be investigated?
There have been multiple allegations.
Are you being investigated? So drop it.
Are you willing to put children in harm's way? Are you willing to put children in harm's way? At what cost?
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Are you willing to put children's safety and welfare before? Are you willing to? What message?
Stop, will you stop, please? He's talking to people.
I'm trying to talk to him.
I'm telling you no. Okay, stop. Yes, he's talking to someone. He doesn't want to talk to you, so he's talking to people. Stop.
Thanks, everybody. Glad you're here.
I'm concerned about the welfare of children. And
Me too. Thank you.
What is the message?
Thanks for
You've known about it for 7 years.
What's the message that this sends the people of the church?
It's Dolan's policy to suspend a priest while the church investigates allegations of abuse against him. But when we spoke to Paddock on the phone, he seemed confident that Dolan would keep him in ministry.
What's the message to the public that a priest that's been accused of sexually abusing children gets to remain in their job as a priest, still working with children?
Right now, they, like me, do not believe the allegations, so the support is good.
The Archdiocese has a zero-tolerance policy.
For those situations which are substantiated and credible. So far, they don't have that. And I don't think they'll ever get it.
A week after our encounter with Cardinal Dolan, we got an update on Paddock's case. The priest had sent this letter to his congregation.
After consultation with Cardinal Dolan and for the good of you, parishioners, the parish, and the church, I've decided to step away from my role as pastor here at Notre Dame. So he's stepping away.
We still had questions. Where would Paddock be during the investigation? And where was he now?
I mean, he could be anywhere. He could be out in these boats, in a park, the beach. You know, he still is listed on the parish website as pastor. His letter to the parishioners basically said, I'll be back when this all blows over.
That is the story of the Catholic Church abuse scandal, is that a perpetrator is identified and they either then disappear into another parish or they disappear into another state or they just evaporate. They're gone.
Archdiocese officials declined to answer our list of written questions. However, they revealed that Father Paddock hadn't just stepped away. He'd been suspended.
The rectory where Father Paddock lives is right up here. It's right next to the church. He stepped away from the church a few weeks ago, but he didn't say where he was going or what he would be doing while this investigation takes place.
When we returned to the parish weeks later, Paddock was still there, inside the church compound.
Hi, Father Paddock. Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Natasha. Nice to see you again.
Nice to meet you. Again.
Yeah, we were wondering if you might have a few seconds to chat.
Not allowed for that. You can't do that. Turn it off, please.
But I know that there's been a lot that's happened in the last few weeks, and we were just wondering how you're feeling now and what's...
Basically, I'm not here. I'm just
You're
here
not
right
in
now.
active ministry anymore. Are you going to stay here?
No. As I said, most of the time I'm not here. I'm here for mail right now.
Where are you going to go during this time?
Right now, I can't disclose that either.
You can't disclose where you're going to be? Are you going to be in ministry at all?
I can't disclose that either.
You can't tell us.
Joseph Willie.
Well, now we know where Father Paddock is. He's still here in the rectory, but he couldn't tell us where he's going to be during this investigation, or even if he's going to be in ministry, which was interesting.
In September, a review commissioned by Cardinal Dolan concluded that there were no active priests under his watch facing substantiated abuse claims. Meanwhile, the Archdiocese faced 2 new lawsuits accusing priests of abusing minors. At least one of them is in active ministry.
This has left all of our people, you, bewildered, frustrated, and angry. Our good and faithful priests demoralized, and us bishops somber and contrite. I have also heard this chilling comment more than once. Cardinal Dolan, we've been so let down that we're beginning to lose trust in you bishops. That stings. Without your trust, I don't have a lot left.
So I would ask him, so you've lost my trust. What do you expect to do about that?
I know you don't want this out there. I know you don't. But have you asked God for forgiveness since you're a holy priest, right? And why did he do what he did to us? And when I say us, it's because I know, and he knows, it wasn't just me.